The arrival of Axis had a major influence on the events of Zeta Gundam, and even though the official anime never told us a lot about what happened on Axis, this is certainly not the case for a certain manga. In Char's deleted affair, we see Char playing a major role during his stay there, so in this part of What If Amuro Got the Alex Gundam, we'll be having a look at how Axis would have fared if Char had been shot down by Amuro. We are again at the end of the Battle of Abawaku, and Mikuve is thinking how to best get the final surviving Zabi, Minerva Zabi, and her mother back to the Zeon capital Zoom City. And without Char's plan and assistance, they could have very well died then and there. Rather than using the big obvious Guazine as a decoy, they all boarded the ship and tried to make a break for it. Naturally, this caught the attention of nearby Federation ships, who immediately began their pursuit and sent out 2 mobile suit platoons. The Zeons tried to launch whatever units they could scramble, and under the leadership of Mikuve, they fought the losing battle of attrition. For now they held, but before long their damaged mobile suits would be out for the count, leaving the Guazine and Minerva to fend for themselves. But the captain of the Magellan made one mistake. He moved his ship and the Salamis closer to the Guazine so they had a shot at it, remembering too late that the Guazine had a superior firing range. As soon as they entered it, the ship turned, aimed all 3 of its main guns at them, and took him out. Now the pressure was on the remaining Jims. Even though they could have taken out the remaining Zeon machines and even the Guazine, they were also beginning to run low. And with no more mothership left, the prospect of being stranded in space wasn't an appealing one. There were still some stragglers fighting, and above all, with the war almost over, they wanted to get home in one piece. Still, the damage they had inflicted on the Guazine was severe, and even most of her defenders, including Mikuve, had died, but it managed to escape Abawaku. After receiving confirmation that the Zeon government was preparing to surrender, they altered their destination to Axis. In the aftermath of the 1-year war then, 2 main political groups would form there. On the one end there was the pro-war group. They essentially wanted to continue the 1-year war as the Zombies would have wanted to, and believed that they could still win. Because of this, they tried everything in their power to lure the Federation to Axis and win a decisive battle against them. On the other end then, there was the moderate faction. While they also wanted to continue with the Republic of Zeon, they realized that fighting against the Earth Federation wasn't the way to go. They were vastly outnumbered, and most of their pilots were rookies with little actual fighting experience. However, the pro-war faction would eventually get it their way. At the same time that they were trying to goad them into a fight, the Federation also had a rising star that was more than willing to take the challenge. Determined to crush any Space-Noid opposition, an elite force had been sent by Jomitov Hyman to deal with the last remaining Zeon stronghold. Unfortunately for the Federation fleet, things weren't going to go as smoothly as they had planned. Their spy inside of Axis had been tricked into sending a virus that completely wrecked their navigation systems, leaving them with only one option: getting their supplies and a fix for their navigation systems from Axis. Shortly after this, the pro-war faction crossed the point of no return by having badly damaged Musais attack the Federation fleet. Seeing what in their eyes was clear Axis aggression, they took out the damaged Musais and moved on Axis. Meanwhile, at Axis, the moderate faction was oblivious to the machinations of the pro-war factions, and for them, this was a clear assault by the Federation. Seeing this, Haman Khan gave a fiery speech, rallying whatever soldiers still had reservations about going out and fighting against the Federation for the sake of Axis. However, even though she had spirit and simulator experience, what the young new type lacked was real combat experience. Regardless, with the blessings of the pro-war faction, Haman would lead their troops into battle. But unfortunately for them, the pro-war faction had vastly miscalculated the Federation's strength and that of the new model gym that they were deploying. These new elite units completely surpassed anything they had seen up until that moment and were inflicting 3 times the losses on Axis than they were taking. Their biggest strength was the ability to dodge incoming fire to such a degree that even Haman and her new type powers initially had trouble hitting them. Slowly but surely, they were pushing back the Axis forces and even began breaking through their defensive lines. And once the breakthrough was achieved, the battle was over for Axis. Due to the density of the Minovsky particles, word of the Federation's breakthrough reached the front far too late, and they would be effectively cut off from Axis. The nimble gems could then just pick them off one by one. At this point, Haman felt that there was only one thing she could still do to turn the battle around: take out the Federation flagship and force them to surrender. But this was easier said than done. Her custom Sidecar Mudam had already lost some of its bits due to a synchronization issue, and in the asteroid belt that the Federation fleet was hiding, she would lose even more bits. She fought through the enemy gyms, reached the enemy fleet, and even took out their flagship, but this was the end of the line for her. All Federation ships now had a lock on her, and her bulky dom simply didn't have the agility to dodge a barrage like that. But then a Musai appeared out of nowhere. It opened fire on the Federation fleet and sailed full speed towards them in order to ram them. This gave Haman the opportunity to fall back, but she didn't come all this way just to run away. In one final attempt at taking out the enemy fleet, she continued her attack, only to meet her untimely demise. And in the end, her attack amounted to nothing. The Federation fleet had taken severe damage, but it was still afloat. Meanwhile, the attack on Axis was still continuing. For the defense of Axis, it now all came down to their last ace in the hole, the Zero GR. During demonstrations and combat practice, this bulky mobile armor had proven to be immensely effective. Therefore, as long as it was around, there was no way that the Federation could even hope to conquer Axis. Unfortunately, the only thing it would amount to was giving the Axis defenders a false sense of security that would be their undoing. Just like everything else, the new gyms had no problems dodging its attacks, and when they saw that it had an eye field, they simply focused their attacks on the rest of the Axis machines in the sector. All alone, the behemoth would reveal its biggest design flaw. Just like Zeon's previous massive mobile armor with an eye field, its operating time was far too short. The Zero GR fell, and so did Axis. The following trials would not be kind to the Axis leadership and would ensure that the asteroid base was placed firmly under Federation control. And that is unfortunately how I believe this alternate universe of my what if story would go. What follows then is the AU being even more screwed than they already were, because there would no longer be a return of Axis. Originally, I had wanted to turn this whole story into a hard-fought victory for Axis, with the big difference being that Haman died. But upon rereading the manga, I was reminded just how important of a role Char played in this battle. He was the one who made the decisive call to have their frontline mobile suits withdraw to put up a last line of defense, and he was also the one who made the Zero GR as effective as it was. When using auto mode, the mobile armor was incapable of hitting the nimble gyms, but because he recognized their movement patterns as being those of Amuro, he was able to manually compensate, allowing him to actually hit them. He also didn't want to rely on the eye field because he didn't like getting hit, and again went in full manual to try and dodge as much shots as possible. Any other pilot would have most likely relied on the eye field and the automatic aim, turning the Zero GR into a giant target that was only capable of taking out a few gyms, as opposed to the many gyms that Char was able to take out. Oh, and he was also the one who saved Haman. So, TLDR, Char was the MVP of this battle. The question then remains, do you want me to continue this what if story from here, basically without a return of Axis, or do you want me to continue on from part 2 with the return of Axis? Which I believe would be the most interesting. But I will leave it up to you with a poll as a community post, of course, because I can't do video polls anymore. But anyways, as always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope all of you watching have a great day, and I'll see you all next time.